It's a pleasure to be here, and on behalf of the World Affairs Council, as Susie said, I'm Edward Walker. I go by Ned, and I'll be your moderator for this evening, and it's my pleasure to introduce this evening's guest. Ilya Ponomarev is an opposition member of the Russian Parliament, formerly a member of the Just Russia Party, and now is a founding member of the Alliance of Greens and Social Democrats, where he represents the city of Novosibirsk in Western Siberia. He's the chair of the Innovations and Venture Capital Subcommittee and also serves as the advisor on international business development, commercialization, and technology transfer for the president of the Skolkovo Foundation. Ponomarev is one of the leaders of the anti-Putin opposition in Russia, and he played a key role in the protests of 2012, and during 2013 and 2014, as I'm sure he will tell us tonight, he opposed anti-democratic legislation introduced in the country and was the only member of parliament in the Duma to vote against the annexation of Crimea. You can find his full biography in tonight's program on the website. So please join me in welcoming Ilya Ponomarev for a conversation on political and social opposition in Russia and the outlook for Putin's government. So Ilya, I thought maybe the best thing to do would be just to start a little bit with your personal background, which I have to say is extremely interesting, unusual. And also get you perhaps to talk about your political orientation and how those overlap with your professional activities over the years.
Yes, so that's what nobody understands, my political orientation. I identify myself as being probably the most left-wing member of Russian parliament, but there are left-wingers which are for the larger government and for higher taxes and for huge bureaucracy. I'm not like that. Because I think that the original leftist idea is about actually minimizing the government and maximizing the personal self-realization of a human being, and it's all about power to the people, and that's who I am. So when there is a word to describe this, I try to describe myself as a left-wing libertarian. That's the most accurate description. So the cornerstones of my political views is direct democracy, participative budgets, eliminating all the intermediaries between a person and the society. What differentiates me from Ayn Randish style libertarians is that those right-wing people, they care only about person and his entrepreneurial capacity, and by that it actually allows people to grab as much resources as possible just for themselves and at the expense of the rest of the society. I still think that it has to be rules, just that the rules need to be established by people themselves and be dynamic so that people can influence those rules. So that at the end of the day, the potential of every individual is fully unveiled, and that should come through the entrepreneurship, through creativity, through free labor, things like that. So that's who I am.
Well, terrific. And perhaps just say a word about your professional activities, because at least according to Wikipedia, you got a physics degree at the age of 14, and then began your
I'm actually
reliable.
up to a good tradition of Silicon Valley. Never graduated, so I finished
physics non-degree at 14.
Yes, I finished 4 grades of Moscow State University Physics Department, so which is equal in American census to bachelor in physics. But in old Soviet system of education, you are about to study 6 years and get what is more closer to master degree, and it cannot be something in between. So what you mentioned from 14 years, I started working from 14 years, and before going to university, I worked in Institute of Nuclear Safety in Russian Academy of Sciences. It was the time when computers has just been brought to Russia, and all our fathers and grandfathers, they knew about mainframes, but they didn't know anything about personal computers. And personal computers were all in English, and somebody needs to understand, what the hell are them and how to deal with them. And I founded a group of youngsters like myself, and we trained all those scientists how to use those computers. And actually, that's how I made my first money. And I founded then my company, my startup, which was called Rusprofi, when I was 16, with my friend who was 18. Because I myself was, when being 16, I'm not allowed to register to incorporate a company by that law. So I became CEO, he became president, and we participated very actively in this burst of commercial activities that was happening in Russia in 1991. But decided that we should focus on IT stuff rather than on trading, what we also tried pretty successfully, but still what interested us was software development. And we have done several great things there. And then I exited the company, sold it to a larger one, which was US-Russian joint venture, and became executive director in that company. And then that business was acquired by a large multinational corporation, Schlumberger, and I joined Schlumberger as their global business development person.
So a true entrepreneur and successful businessman. You also ended up working for Yukos for a while.
Yeah, after Schlumberger, in Schlumberger, we negotiated a kind of strategic alliance between Schlumberger and Yukos was the turned after we have done certain things to be the largest Russian corporation. At the time I joined,
oil company.
Yeah, at the time I joined, it was second largest, and we decided to make a true Western-style company with all the new technologies, and a dozen of top Schlumberger managers moved to Yukos, and we took all the senior positions in Yukos. I became vice president for technologies. Was at the time managing whole of Yukos upstream production, which was not bad. It was at the time like 55 million of tons of oil equivalent, which is slightly less than BP. So it was an interesting job. But then I still decided that I should return more in classical high tech, although we made Yukos very technology savvy company. But I started a venture fund for Yukos' shareholders. And that probably saved me from prison, because Yukos' shareholders were people like Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who were arrested just half a year later. It was pretty challenging time how to clean up what we started to create under our fund thing, but at least I was free and moved into politics. And while my former boss Mikhail was in prison, I stayed for 10 years in politics, which was also kind of interesting thing to be, with the similar rules of engagement, I can say.
Ilya has been a very prominent member of the Moscow political establishment, and, well, I should say the opposition, really, for quite some time now. But I think it's safe to say that the most dramatic, or at least much the most publicized event in his career was when he was the only member of the Duma to vote against the annexation of Crimea. The vote was 445 to 1. So that took some chutzpah. And I wanted to ask you about that. I wanted to ask you about the atmosphere at the time, how you felt about it, whether you felt like that was going to be a political risk for you going forward, as indeed it has turned out to be, which you'll tell us about in a moment. and whether you felt that there were other members of the Duma who actually sympathized with you but just didn't have the courage to speak out.
To tell you the truth, the finger was shaking, when I was pulling the trigger, so to say. But the person who convinced me at the end of the day to vote like I voted was Vladimir Putin. He did it just 2 days before that happened, because we were voting, if I'm not mistaken, on the 20th of March, and on the 18th of March we had a big assembly in Kremlin where Putin was giving a speech to members of the parliament and governors, and where the official agreement with Crimeans were signed to accept them as part of Russian Federation. And what we were voting on, we were ratifying the agreement which was signed 2 days before. And Vladimir Putin at the time gave his famous speech, which was full of words like national traitors, and fifth column and things like that. And for those who don't know, the word national traitor first time was introduced to political vocabulary by someone named Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf. And when Putin said that, and when everybody stood up and started applauding him, and cheering, "Hail to the chief," and "Yes, we've done it," and like stuff like that, I thought that's, somebody needs to be against. And I kept sitting at the time, and some of his propaganda people photoed this, and next day it was released in the media that I was sitting when the national anthem was performed, which of course was not true. And that was like the last straw. So if it's like manipulation like this, and with all this wording and everything, somebody needs to be voting. And also, it was the middle of the election campaign in Novosibirsk, where my constituents are. And I was meeting literally every day with like several hundreds of people. It was 8 to 10 meetings a day, like a regular political campaign. And since I knew that was coming, this vote, I every time asked people who were coming at the meetings, how should I vote? And I think that's actually a fair thing for a politician, which has been rarely used, unfortunately. And I gave them very neutral arguments, pro and contra. What is on the positive side, what is on the negative side. I was very honest in this, by not trying to persuade him in one or another direction. And usually when people voted, it was usually 50-50 split in the audience. Sometimes 40 to 60, but anyway, it's around half and half. Which meant that the society was totally disoriented with this, and there was no dominant position before the propaganda started justifying why we have done this. So before it started, actually, people didn't know. And that's why I was thinking, so if that's the opinion of people who voted for me, then I should at least take the duty and represent those people who are against, if nobody else would do this. And even now, according to all the polls, Russian society is split 85 to 15%. 85 support Putin's policies in Ukraine and 15% against. I think those numbers, they are not very far from reality, but still 15% is some 20 million people. And representing those 20 million people, is not such a bad thing.
And how about the question of whether there were colleagues of yours who you felt wanted to vote against it, but because of the atmosphere?
Of course there were. Firstly, there were 3 people who didn't participate in the vote. My good close friends, Dmitry Gudkov, Sergei Petrov, and Valery Zubov. That's why it was not 449, as it was supposed to be, but 445. Which was also a pretty dangerous position at the moment. And there was a whole bunch of other people who were coming after I voted like I voted, and they're saying like, you bastards, you would come up clean. We will be denied entry to the West. Our houses would be taken away. That we couldn't vote the other way. You bastard. And that's I heard many times in Russian parliament.
And why don't you tell us just briefly about what's happened to you since the vote, and how it is that you end up now more or less in exile in the United States?
I think that after the vote, there was a decision which supposedly was taken by the president himself. At least that's what I have heard through all the informal communications, not to punish me for the vote. There is in our Kremlin administration all set of different means to make life miserable. And I heard a lot of suggestions why wouldn't I leave the country within like half a year after this whole thing happened. But I always was saying, that's not going to happen, and I'm not leaving. They decided to block re-entry of the country for me when I was outside on the business trip. And I think the reason why they decided to undertake action when I was out was that, yes, they didn't want to punish me for what I have done already, but they wanted to prevent this from happening again. And in the middle of August, there was an extraordinary meeting of the parliament in Crimea, and nobody still understands why it was happening, because it was totally empty, So there were some empty speeches, but everybody was present. Whole government was there, president was there, prime minister was there, governors was there. Why? Unclear. I think that the rationale for that meeting I took part in on the 14th of August is that they were preparing actually to officially vote on sending troops to Ukraine, because the actual order to send troops to Ukraine was signed on the 15th of August, so literally next day. But it was done secretly without any public announcements, and our soldiers arrived to eastern Ukraine by 19th, 20th of August, and that's confirmed by a lot of witnesses. But it all was done under the table without any public disclosure. So I think that the plan was to put the parliament to vote for it, so to make it public. But probably at the last moment they got scared of Western reaction and everything and decided to do it silently without any public announcement. But the preparation was still there, and of course they wanted this to be unanimous this time and without any second opinions.
And so since then, the pressure on you has increased to the point where now the Duma has voted to strip you of your parliamentary immunity, which in effect, so you're still a member of the Duma, you're still participating in votes remotely, but you fear arrest if you return, essentially. Is that correct?
Yeah, what they have done, they have blocked re-entry for me, but that decision was supposed to expire in May, because the rationale, the legal rationale for such decision was that they created totally artificially a debt for me for Skolkovo Foundation I was working in. And they opened a civil case against me, and there was a ruling that I indebted, and there is a procedure if a person is indebted to prevent him from running away from creditors. Government can stop crossing the border, so not to leave Russia. I am actually the second person in Russian history when the decision was applied for a person which is outside Russia. The first one was Mikhail Khodorkovsky, my former boss. I was the second, and the third was Mustafa Dzhemilov, the leader of Crimean Tatars. He also is denied entering Russian territory. But in May, that was supposed to be over. And I was, from the very beginning, pretty sure that they would try to invent something to extend it. But I just didn't want any surprises, so by end of March, when it was 1 year anniversary of annexation of Crimea, there's a lot of interviews, media attention, and all interviews was plugging in, that I am planning to return in May. And as soon as this realization probably sank in the heads of prosecutors, literally next week they undertook another action that they now have a criminal case against me, and they immediately put the parliament to vote. It was extremely stupid, actually, from the legal standpoint, because firstly, they are trying to prosecute me for the second time for the same thing, which is against the constitution and everything. Secondly, they decided to apply a criminal case against me, which was already almost closed. The main suspect in that case, the former vice president of Skolkovo, was acquitted and released. And they're charging me with assisting him, the person whom they themselves acquitted and released. And he is living actually in Mountain View now, next door to me. Making such case, of course, it would not stand in any court. But I don't think that the objective is to bring it to the court. The objective is to keep me outside.
Okay, well, let me move to a slightly broader topic then, related, of course, and that is just the general atmosphere and the opportunities for dissent in Russia today. And to ask you in particular how you think the murder of Boris Nemtsov has affected the atmosphere, and whether you sense people are generally concerned about, or that the opposition is truly convinced that things are getting worse and are going to continue to get worse.
Well, this horrible murder, I think, has more quantitative meaning rather than qualitative meaning in terms of atmosphere. Because unfortunately for us, it's no news. It's news for you. For us, we have already several friends of mine were murdered already. It's just that they were mainly left-wing politicians, because it's left-wingers who are like real fighters for civil rights and everything. And they are totally unknown in the West. Even inside Russia, there is not much of media who would be reporting this really closely. Plus, there were murders of several journalists, like Anna Politkovskaya and some others. So we're already living in this atmosphere for quite a while. The most, I think, of course, some people got additionally scared, but it's rather exceptions than a rule. It's very important politically to understand who is behind. Because what Putinists started to say from the very beginning, they virtually quoted Putin himself when Anna Politkovskaya, whom I mentioned, our famous journalist, investigative journalist, was murdered 5 years ago. And Putin was confronted with that murder on some press conference. He said, "It's not me because it's not profitable for me to murder her." It's a real quote. I can't imagine Western politicians to talk in such language. But that was his justification. And they started to repeat the same mantra in regards to Nemtsov. How would Putin benefit from this murder? And I think that indeed Putin himself would not benefit at all. The atmosphere of fear and uncertainty in Russia is anyway present. Opposition is extremely fragmented and alienated from the rest of society and pretty marginalized. Already many people who are sympathetic to opposition are looking to emigrate. So really, there is nothing new. But the damage is, of course, there because of the Western reaction and everything like that. So I think that what actually happened is not what is the semi-official theory right now in the media, that there were Chechens who actually conducted this, and that's a very comfortable thing for many people to believe. It's comfortable for Western leaders to believe in this. that it's not Putin, it's just some notorious former guerrillas in northern Caucasus, which just, they are out of hand, but so what, it's no news. It's very comfortable for the opposition to have such person to blame. It's very comfortable for Putin himself, and I think that that's why he actually awarded an order to Kadyrov literally next day after he made his kind of almost confession that he liked those guys who supposedly conducted the assassination, that they were decent people. That's what they were officially saying, in the media. Of course, like, he's against all murders, but we should understand those guys, they are true patriots, so they had right to do what they have done. I think that real people behind this is our security guys. I think that's people who want escalation in eastern Ukraine. I usually identify them as a party of war, people who are dependent on the military budgets and whatever, and by doing this, they were supposed to be put in charge of the investigation, because it's their job to conduct investigation. They are like law enforcement people, like FSB is like Russian FBI, and I think that they were behind this, and they would benefit a lot. They would redistribute the power in their favor, and they have actual pretty strong candidates to replace Putin if something in 2018, when there would be next elections of Putin. That if sanctions would not be lifted and the same nervous situation in Russia would be there, then they would present, a potential replacement.
Well, apropos of that, the survey results show that Putin's popularity, which was starting to look in trouble in 2011, 2012, has soared with the Sochi Olympics, Crimea, and all the drama in the period since. Do you feel that this very high popularity rating is sustainable? And do you think that unless there's some kind of elite coup or move to remove Putin, that he is going to stay in office for the remainder of this term and possibly run again in the next presidential term?
We should understand what his popularity is based on. Do Russians want to conquer Ukraine? No. Do we take what is happening right now in eastern Ukraine as an aggression? No. The perception of Russians is that we are liberating Ukraine from fascist junta, which is installed by America and Germany in Kiev. That's what people tend to believe. And this is a very comfortable idea for the majority of the population. Because we Russians, we tend to think about ourselves like you are thinking about yourselves in America. We are the liberators. We are the nation with a mission in life. And we are ready to sacrifice ourselves for this mission. We will liberate whoever is in need, even against his own desires and needs, because we feel that's the right thing to do. And when the Ukrainians are saying to us, and Ukrainians is our brothers, it's like really, it's the closest nation to us, and that's how we take them. Even some Russians think that's a mistake that we are living in two separate countries, but okay, so it happened that we are in two separate countries, but still we don't want Ukrainians to fall under rule of America. It's like, they're ours, they're our brothers, how come? And when they say we don't want to be liberated, we usually say, wait a little bit, we know you would be liberated, and then you will find out that this is the right thing to do. You are right now being zombified by American propaganda. We know that you are brainwashed. It would be okay. And that's really, how Russians take it. It's very interesting to understand, like, say, in my Novosibirsk region, 2/3 of population have Ukrainian roots. Because Siberia is people who were relocating from Ukraine in the beginning of 20th century, well, like California, actually, Siberia, is westmost frontier, we are eastmost frontier, it's the most entrepreneurial, the most capable people there were coming in that direction. That's why Novosibirsk is Russian Silicon Valley. That's where all the innovations happening. That's the headquarters of Russian Academy of Sciences. That's where the most high-tech companies are, etc. 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 And 2/3 and still the same 85% support Putin's policies. That means that the majority of people with Ukrainian roots, they feel exactly the same about those policies, no differences. Because people want to be good, they want to feel good, and that's why those actions they really meet with public support. What might happen is that at the end of the day, people would start to realize that it's false, that it's not the case, that we are not liberating, that it's not fascists in Kiev, it's fascists on our side in so-called Donetsk and Lugansk people republics. And they are literally fascists. The former leaders of DNR, for example, they are coming from an organization called Russian National Unity, which is a fascist organization which marching on the streets and shouting Heil Hitler. Skinheads and people like that. And he was replaced, and there are other people coming, but still they're of the same breed. When people start to realize this, I think that this popularity would flip immediately. It would be totally disrupted. It happened already exactly 100 years ago, World War I. It was exactly the same, 1914. War started. We were about to liberate our brothers, Serbs, from the potential invasion and everything. This war was vastly popular among all people in Russia. I think there was not 85% united around Tsar. There was the whole 95%. Also that happened just less than 10 years after so-called First Russian Revolution in 1905, when Tsar was forced to abandon absolute monarchy and to switch to constitutional monarchy to keep his power. So it was violent fighting on the streets, etc. Exactly like it happened, by the way, in Putin's Russia in 2005. We also have a major uprising, which was called the struggle against monetization of privileges, which was really massive and pretty violent in the regions. So it repeats itself. In 1917, it was what we would call a palace coup right now, because it was a very high circle, very high in the elites, what we later started to call a revolution, but the replacement of Tsar, it was coming by accident. They just used an occasion with the hunger in St. Petersburg to force him to resign. And they didn't even want to replace monarchy. They just wanted Tsar to pass the oath to his son, and that was it. But he didn't want to, and it ended up in establishing a republic. And this all disrupted, completely. And October the same year, October Revolution, Bolsheviks, and then Civil War and everything. I think that we can follow the same path easily.
Well, I have a lot of audience questions. Before I get to them, though, I know that you've just returned from Ukraine, and I just wanted the audience to hear your views about the atmosphere there and the direction internal politics is taking.
Firstly, people in Ukraine, they fear a lot that they are going to be betrayed by you. And there were negotiations between Kerry and Putin in Sochi, which looked exactly like this is happening. America has a bigger stake in Iran, and Ukraine can be used as a bargaining point to win Putin's support in Iran and in Syria. Germans also have a lot of economic interest in Russia and have very limited economic interest in Ukraine. And the fact that there were two simultaneous visits, they gave people a lot of different ideas, and that's what anticipation in Russia as well. Secondly, of course, there are a lot of issues with the current Ukrainian government. Is not as corrupt as many media try to report, but of course it lacks experience and ideas in terms of reforms, and it's a huge hunger for human resources in that government. And I really think that Ukraine has not been adequately helped, because what West is doing is help Ukrainians to refinance their debts, but not giving a single dime to reinvest in the economy. And as the result, they have to impose stricter and stricter fiscal policies, which negatively affects the economy. Economy is downsizing. People are running away because taxes are growing. And instead of fostering economic activities and fostering entrepreneurship, it actually works in the reverse direction. And the justification is IMF's advice. I think that the chances that this government will fall are pretty high. The chances that Ukraine would follow the same pattern as happened in Greece are extremely high, because that's exactly the medicine that has been applied to Ukraine. I can't understand why people are not learning by the mistakes that have already been done, not by somebody else's mistake, but your own mistakes are already done. I really think it would be positive for Ukraine if Ukraine would default, because then they at least can use some of the funding they received to actually help their economy. At least that's what we have done in Russia in 1998, and that worked. And just 2 years later, after our default, we have repaid all our debts, and our economy growth first year after the default was around 14%. So that was exactly the right thing to do, and I think that's what needs to be done in Ukraine, but nobody has enough political will and decisiveness to go in that direction.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn to some questions from the audience now. And a number of them have to do with President Putin. Some of them are long, but there's one there's one that's very short and to the point, which I think is a question that many Americans want to know or want to have an answer to, and that is, what does Putin really want?
Putin is the guy who is extremely tactical in his mindset. He thinks about the present day, maybe about tomorrow's morning, and no longer than that. But he is very strong in the decisions that he is making, and makes those decisions fast and executes. And I think that his own objective is to stay in power right now, because he's too scared to walk away. He could have done this in 2008, and I think that actually he was prepared to leave. And I think it was a set of tragical coincidences which were happening in 2011, which actually made him in the last moment to make decision to come back to power. I don't think it was a long-term plan that he would return in 2011. I think it was pretty genuine that he at least was thinking that Medvedev would stay for the second term. And I can tell you, as so to say, member of Medvedev's team, at that moment, we all were absolutely sure that he would be staying for the second term. And he himself was pretty sure that he was staying for the second term. What really affected Putin is, firstly, the situation in Egypt and in Libya especially. He thought that it was totally irrational for America to intervene in Egypt And frankly speaking, I fully agree with him on that. At the end of the day, the same government returned there. All the experiments totally failed, but a lot of blood was spilled, and the country was destabilized significantly. And what was happening, of course, was a direct result of foreign interference from two sides, from US and from Qatar. I really think it was rather psychological for that time Secretary of State Miss Clinton to be doing what America was doing at the moment, and that didn't help region at all. And what is happening right now in Syria is, and with all the ISIS and everything, is a direct consequence of the decisions that were made at that time in Egypt. And of course, Putin was thinking, okay, if guys are acting so irrationally and so irresponsibly, then why wouldn't they do the same thing on Russia? And then it continued to Libya, and in Libya it was even more violent and even less rational. It was just a deal negotiated with Gaddafi just 2 years before that. He abandoned everything, all the terrorist things, that he was doing before. It was a deal made with him, with Lockerbie terrorists and everything. And still after that, there was a revolt which was totally sponsored from the outside. And Putin said, okay, so that might happen in Russia again. So no deals are valid. And secondly, Vice President Biden was coming in Moscow in July, I believe, 1 month before the decision was supposed to be made, and said, United States want Medvedev to be in power. And of course, for a person like Putin, such a statement, you want Medvedev, okay. Now we'll see who will be in power.
Okay, we've got a number of questions about freedom of the press and media freedom, which I know is a particular interest of yours, particularly internet freedom. And so this question is, are people in Russia able to access media resources outside of Russia that might be critical of Putin's policy decisions? Are they interested in alternative viewpoints?
Thank you very much for a good question. Yes, internet is not restricted in Russia. We are no China. We don't have any Chinese firewalls. No just Chinese walls. So if people want to read something, they can always do this. Actually, Russian government, of course, is now trying to fight internet a lot. But is doing it very smartly. Firstly, there are recently adopted pieces of legislation which allow our government to very selectively block whatever resource they want in every certain given piece of time, not by using firewall for outside the cross-border connection, but even inside Russia, like all internet providers, they're supposed to be connected to a certain blacklists server, and if certain URL appears in that blacklist server, it would be immediately, like within half an hour to an hour, blocked on the whole territory of Russia. So every single, even minor provider would be essentially part of censorship effort. Plus, additionally, all the internet majors are mandated to move their servers with personal users' data inside Russia. Most of those laws being applied extremely selectively. So even when there is an obvious violation of certain provision in Russian legislation, it's not being applied. And the reason for that is that they really, they think that threat is more important than the actual execution. And by that, say companies like Google or Facebook or Twitter, they actually tend to comply with what Putin's administration is saying them. And they block opposition activists' pages, they filter out content, because it's all very selectively. It's not a constant flow of requests, but just from time to time. And if they would not do it, their business might be endangered in Russia. So they say, okay, it's minor thing. If Russia would block their business altogether, then it would be, they would be the first freedom fighters in the world and criticize and say, no, this is extremely low profile. This is first thing. And second thing is that Russia is trying to filter unwanted content by creating a white noise. What I mean, say, I tweet something. Immediately there would be thousands of robots, not real people, but bots which are impersonating real people, who would be saying something bad with mention of my name, with my Twitter nickname. That means that people who would be subscribed to me immediately would be spammed with a lot of curses, insults, bad language, whatever. Those bots, they would be filtered out later. But immediately you would get flooded with all the negative things. And the only solution to it, you unsubscribe, you unfollow, because the regular person would not want this to happen. So formally, the information is all there, but you really should want to have this information. And of course, the majority of users, they are neutral, and it's very hard to reach them.
Well, on that same topic, on the broader topic of the information campaign, this question reads as follows. Many people who have followed news about Russia have noticed evidence of, quote, astroturfing campaigns. That is a flood of pro-Putin, pro-Russian, anti-Western comments on articles, forums, blogs, etc. Do you see this kind of information or international propaganda campaign effort having an effect on Western opinions? If so, is there any way to try to counter it?
There are two pillars of such campaigns. First thing is what I mentioned about bots. They are working not only in Russia, they are working internationally as well. And it's paid people, like 40, 50 of them. We know where they sit. It's always released in Russia, because sometimes people just resign and then they tell where and what. It is not a big number, but every person controls several hundreds accounts, and their only job is, full-time, 24 hours a day, to post comments on both Russian and international websites, creating feeling that there is, a lot of supporters of this and that idea. And you would never tell, who is real and who is not real. It's a pretty sophisticated technology, and Russians are always very good in math and AI type things. You would not always tell whether it's a real person or a robot. Especially when it's some brief comments, you stupid one, just go to hell, you would never tell whether it's real or not. Secondly, there is a very smart propaganda platform, which is Russia Today, RT media channel, which is, firstly, it's brilliant in quality. It's a very good quality work. They very consciously decided against trying to reach to mainstream audience. Instead, they focused on 5% of far most right part of Western audiences and 5% of left most part of Western audiences, which altogether contributes to 10% of Western people. And those 10%, they are not reached neither by CNN, nor by Fox, nor by MSNBC, nor by any others, because everybody is trying to be mainstream, because that's where the money is. RT does not care about this. But this 10% of audience tends to be extremely loyal because they have been very easily fed with different kinds of conspiracy theories. Then it's a very quality content, prepared personally by Assange, for example, who is anchor on RT, or Snowden. They're interested guys, and you would never see them in any other kinds of media. And sometimes they buy good quality anchors, like Larry King was producing a syndicate show on RT. There are some like brilliant people like Oliver Stone, for example, who produce documentaries for RT. The rationale for a lot of Westerners is that they think, and I think it's a grave mistake, that since Putin is against American imperialism, it means that he can be considered at least partially as an ally for those who are also like on progressive positions or vice versa, conservative positions. Because he is always for conservatives, he is always saying that I am bigger European than Europeans are. I am like protecting the core of Christian civilization. I am against these LGBT perversions. I am against illegal and legal immigration of Islamist groups. I am like a true devoted Christian, for white people. That's who I am, and that gets very significant traction from a certain part of the population. Like Tea Party is exactly the constituency Putin is focused on. From the other side, there are left-wingers who are saying, okay, so America has invaded Iraq, many other countries, and Putin is now trying to put a stop on this. And plus, additionally, in Ukraine, the current government is very much right-wing, which is true. So if Putin is fighting these right-wingers in Ukraine, that means he's our guy. And right now, just before yesterday, for example, Czechs Communist Party blocked ratification of European Association Agreement between European Union and Ukraine. And that's the result of such an approach.
Well, let me ask you about that. It's my view that a key element of the Kremlin's response to what's been happening is to make a concerted effort to promote divisions within Europe, to undermine the European project, to promote anti-European or EU parties and forces, and also to promote, to the extent possible, divisions between the United States and Europe. Do you think that those efforts, well, first off, do you agree with that? And then also, do you think that those efforts are likely to be successful?
Putin behaves like an abandoned kid, which does not receive enough attention from his parents. He is not against European project, not at all. Just Putin's message is that nothing in the world can be done without us. And if you try to ignore us, then we will try to disrupt whatever you guys are doing. And if you don't pay to us attention when we are nice, and I would like, again, I'm reminding this all the time, nobody tends to believe me, that Putin's foreign agenda officially is his part of his election program when he was running first time for the presidency in year 2000 was first accession to NATO, secondly accession to European Union, and thirdly accession to WTO. You can check this, you can Google this. Even with WTO, it took us 12 or even 13 years after that to get to WTO. And with NATO and European Union, I think that the answer is pretty obvious. And I think that those things, they were pretty genuine. And also, I'd like to remind you that in 9/11 situation, Putin was the first person to call President Bush and bring condolences and offering all the help. And Russia indeed offered and delivered all the help possible fighting with Talibs in Afghanistan. Russia provided all the intelligence information. We opened secretly a military base on our territory in Ulyanovsk for transiting American troops to Afghanistan. We supported establishment of military base in Manas airport in Kyrgyzia and things like that. We supported all this because we thought we wanted to integrate. But then Putin felt like, okay, still when it's coming to vital economic or whatever interests of Russia, we are being ignored. We are not being like our large business people are not allowed to invest in large international companies. There was several issues with Foreign Investment Commission in US. We are not being listened when it's coming to, for example, in Iraq, and there were interests of Russian corporations there in Iraq, and of course they all were totally ignored during the conflict, etc., etc., etc. Then I say, okay, so if you don't understand like our voluntarily friendly advances, then I'm going to screw you, and that's what is happening.
A related question then in terms of how much that's going to continue. Given Russian support for Ukrainian separatists, do you think that Russia might seek to repeat such actions in the Baltics or in other areas such as Georgia or other NATO EU member states?
No, firstly, as I said already, I think that Putin is acting extremely opportunistically. So if there would be an opportunity, strong opportunity, why not? The question whether he would be giving orders to create such an opportunity, I doubt. But our security guys absolutely can do this on their own. Because again, it's a question of influence and power, etc., and their importance in the eyes of Putin. And if they would do it, they would be heroes. So, but in Baltic states, I think that the actual scenario might be very much different and no less scary. I'm just thinking about year 2017. By that time, people already would be extremely tired of the economic difficulties. Elites would be demanding relaxation with the West. All the myths and fairy tales that Putin is giving to his people that new president in US and we will renegotiate is just Obama is crazy and he is a lame duck, so forget about him. But new one, we will definitely renegotiate the story with sanctions and everything. And it would. I don't think that it would be happening. Then elections in Russian parliament and the associated destabilization that is coming together with it. So he would need something strong again to demonstrate to people. And what that might be? Another military campaign. Firstly, it's somehow too simple. Secondly, it may backfire really big time. But what can be done? Again, if we remember the history with Hitler and with Nazi Germany, there was a story with Danzig corridor in Poland. And we have a very similar situation right now with exactly the same territory of Kaliningrad, by that time Königsberg, Prussia, which is now Russian. And the railway goes through Lithuanian territory, and that's what connects us to Kaliningrad. Now, supposedly, there is a provocation and, say, the train is derailed or blocked access to Kaliningrad and whatever. It would be extremely easy to deploy some troops just to protect the railway. No invasion. We're just protecting the railway, that the operations are smooth and normal. According to Lithuanians, of course, it would be an invasion. And that's more than enough then to invoke Article 5 of NATO treaty. Now think about the position of Germany. Firstly, all German politicians, at any cost, no confrontation with Russia. It's pretty obvious after World War II. Whatever might happen, but no confrontation with Russia. Secondly, this particular piece of territory is Germany, and if Germany is about to protect that piece of territory, that would be read by even Europeans as German imperialism. For example, French. So I think that Germany would veto any kind of Article 5 involvement. And that would be the last day of NATO. And then Putin is coming as a victor who just defeated NATO and dismantled the whole alliance. And I think that such plan might very much be on the table. It might be different, it might be not corridor to Kaliningrad, it might be Narva in Estonia, it might be some uprising in, say, eastern Latvia. But I think that the option to confront NATO is definitely something that has been thought over. I wouldn't say that there's like a definite chance that that would happen, but I think it's well thought over, and it might happen anytime soon. And all the talks about nuclear weapons, which is now commonplace in Russia these days, is a preparation of Western public opinion so that Western Europeans would not interfere if something like this happens.
Well, I'm afraid we've run out of time on that unhappy note. I think I can say
Let's
I
talk
agree
about
with
something
Ilya.
happy, like the last.
I think Ilya and I agree that the situation is very dangerous and probably a good deal more dangerous than most Americans realize. So with that, I'd like to thank our speakers and thank the audience for some very good questions.
Thank you very much, but I still very much optimist. And to finish with a positive thing,
Good.
I can tell you that here in America, Russians and Ukrainians, our diasporas, work together. There are no issues between us, which still means that we are one people, that we are still friends, that we still can be brothers and sisters, and that Putin would go. He is not immortal. No technologies will make him immortal. We will make sure of this here in Silicon Valley, and situation will definitely change. Thank you.